Thanks for clicking on Behind the Buzz, Public Fit Theater Company's occasional podcast discussing the myriad details that make up the production of our season of stage plays and readings. This is episode number 4 of season number 2, and today we're continuing our focus on playwrights with the help of Craig Wright, author of our upcoming production of Recent Tragic Events, opening February 4th, running for 3 weekends at the usual place. I'm Joe Kukin, producing director here at APF, and as always, I'm joined by artistic director Anne-Marie Pereth.
Hi there.
Hello, and I want to jump in right away because I'm really excited to be able to talk this afternoon with Craig Wright. So let me do the introduction real quick. Craig Wright is a screenwriter and playwright, best known probably for Lost and 6 Feet Under, and for creating the TV series Dirty Sexy Money. He attended St. John's University in Minnesota before moving on to attain a Master's of Divinity degree from the United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. I'm pretty sure that's in Minnesota too. Listing his television credits would take up most of the next few hours, but his plays include the 4 Pine City plays, all set in Pine City, Minnesota: Molly's Delicious, The Pavilion, Melissa's Arctic, and Orange Flower Water, which longtime APF fans will remember from our 2015 reading season. Other plays include Grace, Mistakes Were Made, and, of course, Recent Tragic Events, billed at the time of its premiere in 2002 as the, quote, first post-9/11 comedy about 9/11. The Jerome Fellowship at age 21, apprenticeships from the McKnight Foundation and the NEA, and the recipient of the 2009 Horton Foote Excellence in American Playwriting Award from Baylor. Yeah. He and I are also nearly exactly the same age.
Fascinating.
Right. Craig Wright, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, and I forgot about the bands. Are you still with the Tropicals and Kangaroo? Do you still do that?
I'm not, but I still write songs, and I'm actually getting ready to record an album in Chicago in March.
What sort of album?
Just an album of all the songs that I never got to put on anything else.
Well, that's fun.
Leftover songs and stuff that I
What type of music?
And also, songs that I've written since then. I don't know how you would characterize it. Nowadays on iTunes or something like that, it would probably be called Americana. It's probably, most like Simon and Garfunkel kind of music.
All right on. So who's your Garfunkel?
Me. I am my own Garfunkel. I used to have a partner in the Tropicals, but we don't make music together anymore.
Oh, and that's either too bad or a blessed relief.
He's a teacher in Minnesota and I live here, so we just don't do it.
Oh, right on. Well, let's jump right into this conversation about recent tragic events. Craig Wright, is there such a thing as free will?
Oh, I would say that's a fake question.
Really? Yeah, there's so much on that too.
That's my term for that kind of thing. Questions that, by the way, I know you're sincere in asking it, but I call it a fake question because it's a question that you can never know the answer to.
No, I'm kind of sincere in asking it, but
I know you are.
Well, no, except I agree that there's no real answer for it. It's the back and forth that's interesting about it, right? It's the sort of perspective that one has on free will and determinism or not.
Right. So what I would say is that whether there's free will or not is a question I can't consider, but we can talk about how life feels. We can say sometimes life feels free, and other times it doesn't feel free. And those are 2 feelings we have. and that's the most I can commit to it. I think, Recent Tragic Events talks a lot and dwells a lot upon determinism.
Right.
Because at the time, my feeling was I was very annoyed with, like the character Ron, I was really annoyed with how surprised everybody was
that
this had happened when it seemed like such a fait accompli. It was just a question of when something like this would happen. Yeah. So I was definitely dwelling on the side of determinism at that point with regard to that situation,
Yeah, well, that is why I asked the question, because it is a big part of that play. And you sort of answered the question. I was curious about where you sort of landed in that argument. He has that discussion with Joyce Carol Oates, who seems to be very pro free will, to the point of saying without free will, we're not really humans. We can't express love without such things.
Right.
But you're saying you were on the opposite side when you wrote the play. Has that changed?
I would say, well, definitely I've changed. It's not so much changed from one to the other. It's more that the terms of the argument, as I put it to myself, have changed. But at the time, I was definitely on Ron's side. But, most of the time with my plays, I used to, in the past anyway, I would usually start out a play with a negative formulation, something I was angry about or upset about. And then by the end, I discovered I had to find something to affirm. And that was an honest search for me. Like, I go as far as I can. I think, okay, well, what is there left to say good things about if all this is true? And I really feel like more than any, Recent Tragic Events is my favorite play of all the plays I've written.
Oh, is that true?
Oh, yeah. And to me, the quintessence of why I love it is the ending where Ron wants to shut off the TV, but doesn't want to do it because the stage manager has said he has to. And so he's caught between his freedom and the destiny are the same. And what do you do then?
Yeah.
How do you manifest your freedom when your free will and the rules of the game both dictate that you do the same thing? You're stuck.
Yeah.
And that feels like such a perfect moment to me. It's such a perfect effigy, so to speak, of a problem we feel inside us that I just love it.
There seems to be a popular, I don't know how into the young person's zeitgeist you are. I feel like an old man these days, but there seems to be a sort of popular resurgence of free will denialism among people who are sort of tired of the state of the world and angry about COVID. And that's why, for me, Recent Tragic Events seems so current, that the sort of denial of any agency that we have in a world that seems to be crazy right now is well played out. Are you connected to that at all? Is there a sense in your world and the work that you do that we're seeing that sort of attitude run rampant?
I think what a lot of people are feeling, or what I'm seeing, is a lot of what people felt that day on 9/11 and the day after, which is a sense of unreality, a sense of topsy-turviness about this can't be real, this can't be happening. Like, how can everything be so crazy and impossible? I was struck the other day by, it started by watching something on Netflix, which I almost never do. I never watch anything. And I was watching something and thinking, like, how is this a show? Like, how did people get paid to do this? And then that started tumbling in my mind to how could 800,000 plus people be defined as having died from this disease? And then our government offers people 4 free tests. 4.
Yeah.
And then the New York Times runs an op-ed piece saying, we don't understand why the Biden presidency is so disappointing. And I'm like, I don't even have to pick a side here. It's just nuts. Yeah. It's crazy. And then you tell me that the Republicans can gerrymander districts at the disadvantage of Democrats, and Democrats can't do anything about it. And Putin wants to invade the Ukraine, and we're not going to do anything about that. There's no firm place to stand on anything. I don't know where the reality is to put my foot on so I can kick with the other leg. And I think a lot of people are feeling that. And so I think when people watch the play and remember what it felt like that day, I think they'll resonate very much with how they felt right before they walked in the theater.
Well, that's why I actually chose the play for the season, because we read the play during lockdown, and you talk about the new American way in the text. And I felt like, yeah, we're experiencing the new American way right now. We're having, and I do feel a sense of dread and a sense of feeling out of control, much like people felt during 9/11. But I don't want to talk about COVID anymore. I'm so tired of talking about COVID. But I do want to talk about my personal feelings about living through this situation. But I'm so inundated with all of this chaos and unreality that I can't even imagine going to a play that directly discusses COVID, but I want to have that feeling of catharsis with people in the theater. And I feel like your play does that without directly hitting us over the head with the COVID talk.
Recent Tragic Events is almost the perfect play for that sort of release in this time. I think I'm really glad to hear that it's your favorite. Not that I have a horse in that race, but.
Well, to go back to what you said, when you asked me whether I feel that there's a strong will towards determinism, so to speak, in the culture, if we switch the words a little bit, I can agree with you, which is to say, I think people feel like a lot of things, they've had to recognize now that a lot of things are beyond their control.
Yeah.
And that's definitely in the air. That, wow, like I'm not in control of my life completely.
Does that, I want to get a little wonky here for a second. Does that encourage you and sort of prod you towards writing? You got very animated in talking about that horrible Netflix show, which I really want to put you on the spot to name, but I won't do. But does it sort of move you in the direction of wanting to get some of this stuff down on paper and create another perspective?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm working on a play right now that is very, very, you would never guess that it's about that. Yeah. Like I always have this habit of writing at such a oblique angle from what people think I'm doing. Like I was commissioned by Hartford Stage to write a play about Jesus. And I wrote a play called The Unseen, which is about two guys in two adjacent cells who are tortured all the time.
Yeah.
They both have a theory. They both have a theory about whoever's in the middle between them. And when I turned it in, they said, like, we told you to write a play about Jesus. And I'm like, I did.
He's the third character in the middle.
The third dude. And so I am working on a play where the main point of the play really is, but in a hopeful way, you don't know what story you're in. You can think you know what story you're in life, but you don't. And if you're depressed and you feel like, oh my God, my story is a tragedy, you can, if you just stick around long enough, it might turn out to be something else. And so that's very interesting to me right now, is that you don't know what story you're in.
I want to ask you a little bit about that, not specifically, because I'm sure you want to keep those details pretty close to the vest, but I'm curious about you don't know what sort of story you're in. It seems like a fun bit of theatrics, and you seem attracted to theatrics. I mean, specifically the coin flip, the fake coin flip. And I should say to everyone out there listening, there will be some spoilers here about recent tragic events. So tune out if you don't want to know all the complete ins and outs, but the coin flip in recent tragic events, and the sort of breaking of the fourth wall with the fake stage manager reading from the script, and the hand puppet. And another play, one of my favorites, actually, Grace, the first 3 minutes of which is literally a murder in reverse. Very theatrical. Those theatrical elements seem to really appeal to you. Is that a fair thing to say?
Put simply, I guess I would just say even though it's a very, very serious play about very serious things, the main character is basically comes on stage at the beginning of the play and makes it clear that he doesn't like musicals and thinks that musicals can never be about the real details of life or really get into the real issues of being a human being, that they're all sort of fake. And then he gradually realizes he's in a musical and has to finally consent to it and sing.
Are you and your own Garfunkel doing all that as well? The music and all that?
I'm gonna write the first draft of the songs, but I'm sure they'll replace me with somebody famous at some point.
Isn't that? But
I have to write the songs to kind of know what they're about.
What sort of impact does your background in theology have on this sort of work?
I'd say a big one, but it's more procedural than it is conceptual, in the sense that I don't try to transmit theological ideas through my work. I try to leave things pretty balanced that way. But my work is heavily informed by the sacramental process of like gathering in front of people and performing rituals.
Ritual, yeah.
And how you can kind of help people, I don't know, by performing. I think an effigy is one of my favorite words. Is like, I said to somebody once, the reason theater is so successful as an effigy of human life is that human life already feels like an effigy.
Oh, wow.
And therefore we can make the leap. We watch it, like plays to me are very much like life. You're generally stuck with who you are. You can't change it that much. Aside from suicide, you have to stay till the end of the play.
Sure.
And you kind of have to stay and be who you are. And then you have to find your wiggle room inside that as a way to feel like you have your dignity. And
that's another free will argument, though, isn't it? Where you're staying through the end, and are you the author of your own story, or are you letting the story happen to you?
Yes.
And it sounds to me like you believe that you are the author of your own tale all the way through to the end. So suicide notwithstanding.
Yeah, I would say I believe, that old thing that character is destiny.
Yeah.
Right. But the question is, well, who gives you your character? How'd you get that? I think that kind of question goes around and around and around. But I think with theater, I'll just speak for theater. There's a general prejudice in the theater, right? Towards consenting to be determined. What do I mean by that? What I'm saying is, since in general, the actors perform the play, since in general, the actors maintain their characterization, plays tend to be really good arguments for the idea that there's a pleasure in consenting to be part of the show. That's a message that comes through in plays quite often, because that's how plays work. Right?
You kind of voice to the stage manager at the top of Act 2 in Recent Tragic Events, where she discusses not really being a stage manager. She is, in fact, an actor, and she's saying these words because they are written out for her. Here, she shows the script to the audience member and says, I am saying the words that you are now reading on the page. So that sounds like that's been an attitude of yours for a while. And I want to come back to theology again, because I'm curious whether that, what came first, the writing or the interest in those sort of bigger philosophical concepts? Because that seems like what you just talked about in terms of the consent to be part of the performance, consent to be through a story. It feels like that could be a pretty big theological conceit as well.
Yeah, I think so the question is, which comes first, the theology or the theater?
Yeah.
I would say the theater, because, I remember I was in 8th grade and somebody asked me to try out for the Fantastics, and I played the boy in the Fantastics in 8th grade. And
can you sing that role? You have the range for that? Maybe
then I could in 8th grade. But even as a child, a little boy, my house when I was like 5 years old, there was Jesus Christ Superstar, Hair, and Joseph, the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. That was what I listened to. And so I was into those things before I ever had a inkling about theology or philosophy. So I would say first comes theater, and then the rest. I mean, I think religion is just a glorified form of theater anyway.
Oh, expand on that. We all of us theater nerds who ever took a 101 class know that the history of theater is certainly intertwined with the church and putting butts in seats and doing the passion plays and whatever. But it sounds like you're saying more than that.
Yeah, I just mean that people gather to see something enacted. The Greek tragedies work that way. The Mass in the Catholic Church works that way. The people get together, they watch the thing happen, and everyone nods. They go, "Yeah, okay, good." Then they go home.
Well, and participate in some ways too. I mean, I can't watch Star Wars and not hear Yoda say, "May the force be with you," without sort of internally saying, "and also with you." That call and response thing, I don't know. It doesn't teach audiences the right behavior, I think, for most theater, but that's there too. That participatory nature of the whole thing.
Completely, and I like it when there's participation by the audience too, which is why Recent Tragic Events works the way it does.
Can I ask you about the origin of the idea of Recent Tragic Events? I have to say, you got some criticism for creating that play so as soon following the event as you did.
Yeah.
And I disagree with all of that criticism. I think that's nonsense, because the first question I want to ask, which is sort of whence the idea, because I don't, and maybe I'm wrong telling you what your play is about, but I don't feel like that play is about 9/11. It feels like it's about the connection that people need in times of great stress and horror. But I'm wondering what was the process that compelled you to create such a thing at such a time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've always been kind of, what's the word? Confrontational, or, my mind just goes directly to the end of every thought, and I just move on to the next one. And so when your mind works that way, you don't really give things much respect. It's like you move on to every idea moves to the next idea. So here we go. And so I always like to be, what's the word? I'm not not controversial. I don't like controversy for the sake of itself, but I just go where the question has to be. But for me, but what really pissed me off and made me write the play is actually in the play. It's when Katie Couric was interviewing the firefighters.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I was just like, and so as much as the play may be about what you said, which is people connecting, the play also has a real bone to pick with the media.
Yeah.
And the way
that TV is on, you have that TV on through the whole show, sort of relentlessly reliving. And I think, is it Ron who says, "Can we turn this off? We've seen the same thing 1,000 times now." And I remember that specifically from that day. So
the idea that it's kind of turned into a product, that really pissed me off. And I actually felt like I had to write it really quick. I wanted to get at this while the question was still there. And when it premiered in Washington, D.C., no one complained. No one said it was too soon. They were like, "Thank you."
Yeah.
Only in New York. Because obviously, they went through it, and although the Pentagon got hit too. Mm-hmm. So, but in New York, they were very touchy about it. But that was what it was.
Was that the extent of your personal reaction to 9/11? Certainly not. The irritation with the firefighter who claims, and in the play he says, they ask him,
not with the firefighter, with Katie Couric.
With Katie Couric, with the question being, how do you feel in this moment? What's it feel like sifting through the debris, looking for your brethren, and that ridiculous question? You had to have more of a personal reaction than just that.
Well, I mean, I did, but I feel like, all of us have a job to do. And my job with regard to that was not to concentrate too much on those other feelings.
Huh.
It wasn't my job to write a play grieving those 5,000 plus people. That's someone else's job. My job was to use it to talk about this other thing. Also, because I happened to believe at the time that to try to write a play that was actually about it would have been the height of presumption.
Sure.
And really rude. Mm-hmm. So I try to make it clear that, like, this play we're relativizing this, and we're going to put it over there. It's just an example of something. We're going to really talk about this other thing, right? We're going to talk about free will. We're going to talk about determinism. We're going to talk about interconnectedness. We're not going to talk as if we could dare to say, boy, how sad that those people died. No, duh. Of course it's sad. But I would never have dared to write that play. It would seem terrible.
Do artists then have some responsibility to react to such events and to write about events? Is there does that make the best art if artists are sort of bear the responsibility to react to the events of the times?
I will say this. I think that the best plays are part of the conversation that's happening right now. And like, if you're in a conversation with people And then like 3 years later, you say something back to them, in the middle of the people are like, what the hell are you talking about? But if you say it immediately, it's like, oh, back and forth, back and forth. And even a play like Waiting for Godot, which seems to sort of exist before time and be out of time, I don't think is out of time at all. And really is responding quite actively to the times in which it was written, and to the post-war and malaise. So I think it was a very political play in its own way. So I think it's good to be speaking to what's happening, but you can do it, as I said, as obliquely as you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Plays have to be reactive but not so, I guess.
Well, I'm tired of being hit over the head with everything like I'm an idiot. I would rather there be more mystery and things be more provocative so that I have to sit and question and muse over a thing. So that's what I appreciate about the play as well.
Well, thank you. I mean, thank you. I think a lot of plays, especially with the theater audience being what it is, a lot of plays are like inviting people to come and agree with something they already agree with. Mm-hmm. And that's a drag. Like, and it's a,
you are confrontational. I mean, if you're looking to set yourself up right away as in conflict with an audience, that's a bit of a confrontation as a playwright. No,
but I don't think it's much of a confrontation, because I think deep down, people actually want to be engaged. They want questions to be put before them. They want to be asked to think about things. But they just don't want to be. And by the way, this is a totally separate issue from like putting on a show. Like I would, if I had, I would always love to go see a production of You Can't Take It With You.
What do you say to the people who say, oh, I just want to be entertained, shoot somebody in the face, something up, I just want to be entertained?
I say, I totally get it. If I could write different plays, I would. I'm sorry.
You don't think you got that one in you? You don't think you have the next Jason Bourne movie in you somewhere?
Oh, well, no, certainly not that.
Well, I have to say, I have to tell our audience, I didn't put it in your bio, but you are the screenwriter for Mr. Peabody and Sherman.
I am.
Yeah. That's kind of a connection we have. My sister-in-law is actually the producer of that series over there. So we have that in common there. Right? Cool. No, I don't know that. Did you approach something like that with, certainly writing a film is different from writing a play.
Well, the way I got that job was they'd been through a couple of scripts and then they hadn't worked out. And then they called me and they asked me if I wanted to, someone saw Mistakes Were Made in New York and thought, oh, let's ask him. He knows a lot of multisyllabic words. And so we'll call him.
Let me just tell my audience really quick that Mistakes Were Made is a 2-character play, really a 1-character play with an assistant who mostly appears off stage. He is an agent, a powerful agent, he's an executive producer, trying very hard to make a movie about the French Revolution and trying to convince the playwright that he should rewrite it in order to get the stars that he needs to do it. That's Mistakes Were Made. And it is a tour de force. And I think Michael Shannon, did he originate the role? No, he didn't originate it, but he was the most popular that I had heard of.
Yeah, no, he originated it.
He did? He
started it in Chicago, yeah.
And there's for some reason, a puppet fish, an animated fish that he talks to.
Yeah, it's another play with puppets.
Yeah. And then I interrupted you again. I'm so sorry. But they wanted that sort of snappy
dialogue,
Hollywood dialogue.
And they said, they asked me if I wanted to do it. And I thought about it and I said, well, here's the deal. Like, you got to play about a dog who's a genius with a time machine, and he adopts this boy who's a moron. So I feel like at some point in this movie, the dog has to say to the boy, Sherman, of all the time travel adventures I've ever been on, the best one is the 12 years I've been traveling through time with you.
Oh. And
they gave me the job. And then they did everything in their power to make sure that sentiment never made it into the movie.
That is too bad. I have to confess, I've not seen the film, but because we are literally almost exactly the same age. You were born in April. I was born in March of '65. I remember all of those vignettes, those cartoons of Rocky and Bullwinkle when I was a kid. The research for that film must have just been so much fun.
It was. And if you see it, you'll get to see, I also got to continue my fascination with the French Revolution because the whole opening sequence is about the terror.
Oh, wow. So what is that about? What is your fascination with the French Revolution?
I love the French Revolution so much. Like, I wish I could write a mini series or something about it, but I don't speak French and it wouldn't make much sense. Like,
well, how has this not happened to Netflix yet? They're dying for content. And I can imagine that a series about the French Revolution would last at least 6 episodes.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I would love to write it. I love the French Revolution. And it's like, as Felix says in Mistakes Were Made, talking about the French Revolution, he says something like, I just love the balls on those guys. They changed, to change the names of the months. Like, such balls. It's like, there was some Chinese, some leader in China in the 50s or 60s. Someone asked him what he thought about the French Revolution. And he said, I don't know. It's not over yet.
Oh, wow.
I totally feel that way. What the French were trying to do was figure out what on earth is the foundation for ethics and society without God. And it's such a great question. And they proved how hard it was to figure out because they didn't. It was a mess.
Yeah.
But America is still, sort of flailing around inside this problem because America was founded as a Judeo-Christian nation, but with an ideal of secularism, with an ideal in which everybody gets to believe in everything, which eventually leads, by the way, to materialism. Because how can everyone believe in everything? You have to just start respecting everybody, right? Mm-hmm. You're gonna stop theorizing about God and start talking about how do we respect each other. Mm-hmm. Which I think is a great experiment. And I think if there is a God would have a lot more fun inside us. If we stopped thinking about God and started thinking about respect, it would allow for much more free flow of the God part of us to move around. Thinking about God and these unanswerable questions tends to shut the energy down. Whereas let's talk about what we can actually do. Like, we can do better at listening.
Because we can't speak for God. We can only speak for ourselves.
We can't speak for God and we can barely speak about it. So let's talk about what we can, which is like, hey, don't interrupt me, Craig, or things like that. Like, that would make the world a better place if Craig stopped interrupting. More than if Craig told you God exists, because what would that mean? It would be a meaningless statement. But if you said, Craig, don't interrupt me, I'd be like, I'm sorry. That would be better.
Yeah, the first person I've heard who's ever sort of mirrored my own understanding of the foundation of the country, which was the country was based upon perhaps Judeo-Christian ethos, but the government was based on sort of leave us alone, believe what you want, and not that. And I never heard, the first I've sort of heard express that historical opinion.
Well, let's also remember that, and then the land belonged to a lot of other nice people. Mm-hmm. A lot of very nice people who we killed. So
yeah, the Judeo-Christian ethics seemed to go out the window when we decided that that the West must be one.
So what's coming up at A Public Fit? Our 2021-22 stage reading season continues with Diana Sun's Stop Kiss running for just one night on March 25th, and we'll conclude the readings this year with Will Arbery's Heroes of the Fourth Turning on June 24th and June 25th. As always, admission to the readings is free of charge, but we still recommend arriving a little bit early to the library just to take advantage of the best seating. APF will be returning to the main stage at our main stage, the usual place, with Craig Wright's ridiculously inventive Recent Tragic Events. It runs February 11th through the 20th, and our final main stage show, Things I Know to Be True by Andrew Bovell, opens April 1st and runs through April 25th. For more information and specific showtimes or to purchase tickets, please visit us online at apublicfit.org. Now, in keeping with the ongoing recommendations from our theatrical peers, as well as the CDC, the wearing of masks during these performances will be strictly enforced. We're doing our level best to make our audiences feel as safe and as comfortable as possible. If there's one thing we've learned in the past couple of years in these days of forced isolation and pandemic weirdness, we really do need these shared theatrical experiences, these emotional stories now more than ever. And I hope you'll join us. And thank you so much for your continued support.
Can I ask about Joyce Carol Oates? This is shifting gears a little bit, but I'm curious about why that particular author and whether you have a connection to her or a relationship with her. For our audience, the character of Joyce Carol Oates appears in the play, although it is made very clear by a very careful playwright that it is not, in fact, the Joyce Carol Oates. It is a representation of a character who happens to be named Joyce Carol Oates and who happens to have written word for word all of her many books. She is also portrayed as a hand puppet.
Right. So people always ask me why Joyce Carol Oates, and I always say, because her works are multiplicitous and strange, like the Lord of this world. So she's a great sort of metaphor for something big, because there's so many books and they're all sort of grim. And so that was part of it. It's funny.
It is very funny.
She's a small little lady. And so she's a fun person to make a sock puppet.
And I've never seen a production without the curly hair that comes off of the puppet to sort of mirror her own curly do.
And finally, by the way, nested boxes here, Russian dolls, credit where credit is due. This idea that an author could write word for word what another author wrote is absolutely stolen straight from Jorge Luis Borges in his short story, Pierre Menard, author of Don Quixote, in which he suggests that this guy, Pierre Menard, wrote Don Quixote word for word after Cervantes did. So it's a stolen idea too.
Why? It's another theatrical, a fun theatricality in a play full of fun theatricality. Did you have to run anything by her? Did you have a lawyer in touch with somebody who said,
one of the 5 things in my life I've done that was really smart was by declaring her not to be Joyce Carol Oates, you couldn't do anything. I didn't do anything.
It's true.
So no, she never bothered me, but I heard she did come to the play.
Oh.
And I think she wasn't very happy about it.
Oh. That surprises me, but I would have loved to have been there for that.
Yeah.
I wish I would have known why she wasn't happy. That's the real question.
Are you curious? Why? Yeah. Are you curious about her reaction at all, or does that interest you?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't like it when someone calls me where I don't know how they got my number. So I totally feel for her.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
you say you're writing a play now. Are you still involved in well, obviously you're involved in theater. What are some of your favorite 21st century plays as we begin this new decade or this new century?
I would say my favorite play of the 21st century is probably something called An Oak Tree.
Okay.
Who's the playwright?
I can't remember his name, but he performed the play, and he came out, and he directed it too. He came out on stage at the beginning of the play, and he said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. We're going to do this play in a little bit." And he pointed to someone in the audience who was a different person every night, usually an actor that you knew, and said, "So-and-so is here tonight, and they're going to do the play with me." Until an hour ago, they'd never seen the script, but they came an hour earlier, and so they learned some lines. Other times I'm going to tell them what to say by speaking into an earpiece that they're wearing. And other times I'm just going to tell them what to say right to their face, and then they'll do it. And then everyone says, "Okay, great. So let's start the play." And then he shifts gears, and he starts talking as if he's a hypnotist in a bar. And he invites 10 volunteers up onto the stage. And the last one is that actor person that we've been warned is actually in the play. And he starts doing bar hypnotism tricks with these volunteers. And it works. People they cluck like chickens, and they do these things because that's what people do. And so already you're in a double reality where you know people are going along with it, but that's a perfect representation of what happens with bar hypnotism. Right. And then eventually he notices a weird vibe coming off of this other person and says, like, I'm sorry, but have we met before? Say, yes, we have. Yes, we have. Right. And it goes on. And you gradually see that the story is about how this bar hypnotist drove home drunk one night and killed this guy's daughter with his car. And this guy has come back to the bar tonight to confront him about it.
Oh, wow.
But it's all done in this weird way where a lot of times he's feeding the person their lines. And I just think it's transportive and magical and great. I mean, there are a couple plays that have recently been on Broadway where people have been, like, I think a lady lip syncs an interrogation I think people are getting into this now. I like to see the mechanics. It's like, how a couple of years ago, like 4 decades ago, I guess, people began to like seeing the rafters and the exposed brickwork and all that stuff.
Yeah.
In architecture.
The brickwork and the brick wall in the back upstage. Yeah.
So I like that in theater. Like, show me the mechanics of making it happen. Because
I'll just say again, you seem very drawn to the theatrics of the unusual, of audience participation.
I totally don't want to see lights rise on an Upper West Side apartment in Manhattan. But that's kind of what the joke is of recent tragic events, like lights rise on an apartment. But of course it's not an apartment, right? Because the stage manager came out beforehand and made you flip a coin. So But like, I don't like realism except in comedy. Like, I totally will accept it with You Can't Take It With You.
Oh, that's fair. Why the distinction, do you think?
Because I think comedy is, I think it's just trying to do a different thing. I wish I could write comedies. I can't.
You don't feel that Recent Tragic Events is a comedy.
It has some comedy.
Very funny.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, no, it's really funny. Whenever I think about that play, I think about Michael Escamilla playing Ron in the first production of it and telling Andrew that the way they drink wine in France is through a napkin.
The towel.
Through a towel.
Yeah.
Because that's how they do it in France.
Yeah. To filter out the sulfates.
Yeah. I love that. So yeah, I know my plays are funny, but I always am writing to try to say something. And I really admire these craftsmen who can just like make an object, lend me a tenor. Like I'll go see Lend Me a Tenor anytime. I just want to see silly things. I like silly things. Oh, by the way, one of my favorite plays in the world is Dogs, Hamlet, Cahoots, Macbeth.
I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it.
It's a Tom Stoppard play from way back when, but I really like that play a lot.
What is it about it that appeals to you? The silliness? I assume it's silly because it's Tom Stoppard.
Totally silly and totally, I don't know how to describe it. It's just, one of my favorite stories about a play ever is an actor friend of mine named Paul Sparks, who your listeners and your members have probably seen in TV a lot. He did a production of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead many, many years ago. And 2 times early in the play, there were these long pauses. The director put in these long pauses, right? And then in the middle of the play, there's a speech about a box. And it's about like, if you were in a box, how would you know you're in a box? Mm-hmm. And so the director had already set up that there would be these long pauses, right? And so after the speech about the box, the actors just stopped and stood there. And they never went back to the play again. And the audience eventually just got mad and...
Wow.
You do like confrontation, Mr. Wright. You really do.
So good. He said like people would spit at us, they'd yell at us. And they'd just have to stand there on the stage and wait because it's so perfect. Because the speech is about how would you know you're in a box? And I was like, well, here we are in this play. Like, can we leave? Can we just get up and go? I want to leave. Perfect.
This may make sense. This may make sense to no one in the world but you, Craig Wright. But you remind me of Samuel Beckett, and because you brought up Gatto earlier, I feel that the comparison is even more apt. There's a story about Beckett in one of his first forays into the theater with a brand new crew, and he has a stage direction in his play that says the door is imperceptibly ajar, and the stagehand would go up and he would sort of crack it open, and Beckett would call him over and say no, and he'd point to the script and say it is imperceptibly ajar, and then the stagehand would go up and then try and shut it again, and Beckett would call him over and point to the stage direction that says no, it's imperceptibly ajar, and each time making him make these adjustments until it was the way that he wanted it to be. You strike me as that same sort of personality.
A persnickety bitch?
No, not at all. Someone who enjoys the silliness and the silliness and the profundity can coexist. I
totally agree with that. I would never want to do that to someone with less power than me, but yes.
That is, I forget that, yes, we are woke, and that is a fair thing to remind me of. We are well at the time that you have promised to give us. I want to thank you so much for this conversation. Is there anything that you would like to plug moving forward? I don't know. Do you have a vlog or a blog or a play that's coming up or a TV series that needs more viewers?
No, what I would just say is thank you so much for producing the play. And thank you to all the people who come see it. I hope that it is a pleasant night for you and that you get something out of it. And I never take it for granted that people want to come see my plays. So I really, really appreciate it. And to be a playwright is a great honor. And I really enjoy my life. So thank you.
I don't think we're done with you as a playwright. I think we're going to take another look at Grace and another look at
it's on my short list.
Orange Flower Water. Yeah, it's on our short list. But when you said earlier you're irritated by unannounced phone calls, we are printing your phone number in the program so that anyone who has questions can call you directly. So when that happens, you'll know from whence they came.
Have you read Molly's Delicious?
I have not read Molly's Delicious.
You should look at Molly's Delicious.
Well, now that I've reminded myself about Orange Flower Water, I want to go back and read all four of those Pine, Minnesota
Pine City
plays.
Yeah.
Pine City plays. I'm awfully curious. I think Emery was just reading to me the last monologue again of Orange Flower Water, and I have to tell you, she'll blush a little bit, but it brought her to tears, that last letter that he reads. And another theatrical device. He breaks the fourth wall in a letter speaking directly to the audience. But it's such a beautifully written monologue.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
And it will make me go back and read those other plays.
Molly's Delicious was a real turning point for me. I had written a few plays before that had gotten done once or twice, but then I became friends with this poet who's dead now named James Merrill. And he kind of got me on a different path. And I stopped writing about what I thought I was right about, and instead started writing about what I loved. And Molly's Delicious is about a young girl in 1965 who was from the East Coast who gets pregnant after a one-night stand from a boy in the Coast Guard and is sent to live on an apple orchard in northern Minnesota with her aunt and uncle. And she insists that the boy from the Coast Guard is going to come back from Vietnam and marry her, but he never responds to her letters. And this young mortician shows up early in the play because he's seen her in town and he wants to marry her because he's in love with her. And she says, no, Jerry's coming back for me. And no one believes her. And then Jerry comes back and asks her to marry him and then tells her that he's going to have to go back to Vietnam in 9 days. And that's the end of Act One. And
wow.
And it's all about this. It's all about this girl named Allison, who I love so much, who says in the middle of the first act, when she's talking to Alec, she goes, Alec, I have more hope and imagination in my little finger than the entire ugly world put together. Do you know what that's like? And he goes, no. And she says, it's really lonely. And he says, I know what that's like.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm gonna read it now for sure. And we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I just in real quick in passing, you've got a couple of shows that are sort of modern looks at Shakespeare plays. I'm part of that cycle as well. Melissa Arctic, isn't that a take on Winter's Tale? Yeah, because I was upset with Winter's Tale because I was so annoyed on Leonte's behalf because these girls were saying we had her hidden in the closet for 20 years. I'm like, don't fool me. Don't pull tricks on me. And so I thought, let's do the play, but she's really dead.
Like, let's really kill her.
I love it.
Because I feel like then the real argument can be made that the play is there to make, which is the only thing that can create life again is art. You can't, because that's what the play does, right? In the play, it's a statue. And in my play, it's a painting. And at the end of the play, my play, when the mother would come back to life, after the play was over, people would say to me, like, are you saying the mom really comes back to life? Because she really did die in the first act.
Yeah.
Are you saying the mother really came back to life? And I always say, in the play.
I love this idea that, yes, it happens in the play. That's enough for me. Craig, thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation.
So
I truly appreciate it. It was truly a joy to meet you.
Tell me when the play opens.
We're opening February 4th and we run for 3 weekends.
I'm coming to Vegas.
Oh, we would love that. We'd love that.
All right. Awesome.
And I think that's going to wind up this episode of Behind the Buzz, a continuing conversation with us here at a Public Fit Theater Company. This was season 2, episode 4. and no one is more surprised than I am that Craig Wright agreed to talk with us today. But I'm really glad he did. If you enjoy these conversations, please take a moment to subscribe. We've got the rest of this year's season to talk about. Stop Kiss is coming up. Heroes of the Fourth Turning, and then our final main stage show, Things I Know to Be True. And we'll continue talking with performers and directors and designers and hopefully another special surprise guest or two. You can tell us what you think by rating this podcast on Apple Podcast or Google or Spotify or Audible or Stitcher or wherever you download these conversations. Your feedback really does allow other listeners across the inner tubes to discover these chats and to join the APF conversation. Or you can contact us directly through email at behindthebuzz@apublicfit.org. Behind the Buzz is a product of a Public Fit Theater Company in association with Giant Leap Industries. Adam Paul, director / bona fide badass.